Hey, how's it going, everyone? Just want to do a quick video, slightly humorous, but obviously, on my channel, a very serious topic. But I want to talk about um, trolling and how we can learn a lot from our opponents. And it's just anybody who has a channel and posts flat Earth content, you'll know that you post anything with flat Earth in the title, you're going to get bombarded with the usual suspects, and then I expect every time I post a video with flat Earth in the title, the next day I'll have, since my channel is kind of small, like 2 to 5 messages in spam, and they'll just be really, really long messages. And credit to the YouTube algorithm for catching their own people and trapping it so it doesn't get posted right away. And they go hard, like some of them I don't even think are necessarily paid to do it. I do think a lot are, and I do think a lot of them are automated. You can just tell because they're just copy and paste, and they're like paragraph long and all that kind of stuff. And then they get, these ballers get really precise, when it comes to flat Earth type things. But when it comes to showing us proof for that we live on a spinning ball flying through space, which is insane, they'll tell us, sticks in the ground, measure angles to Polaris without telling us how to measure the angles and all that kind of stuff, and so it's to me it's settled science for myself personally. There's nothing left in my mind. The bottom up thing is taken care of in many different places now on YouTube, and it makes sense. Gravity is not real, and we're not spinning. It's obvious. And so I do want us to learn something from our opponents, and I think this is a little bit tongue in cheek, but we can get a kind of a sense of the way we can honor God by the way that the shills honor the government. And, there's something to be said here. I do want to say just fundamentally a quick few points that I made, that what God likes has to be reflect the way he is. And so by that, we would have to assume that God, since he likes sovereignty, he is sovereign. We all sort of have this sense, even if we're not being given the ability to be free, that that's a good thing. That's a virtuous thing. He's creative just by his creation. You can argue whether it's in a ideal state or not, and it's definitely not, but it's a creative entity that would have made all of this. He likes people who are deep thinkers, who look, beyond the surface. People who are clever, people who gave Jesus clever replies, humble replies. He acknowledged that, and people who are unique, and things that are unique. God does value that, even though it doesn't seem like that way right now. And so that's a way for us to learn from our opponents. We still have to maintain those qualities, but we can learn from them, though, try and apply those qualities, but just do it, trolling and chilling for God. And they go extremely hard, the people who I believe are on the left-hand side. So one thing they'll do for the government and for Satan ultimately is they'll make up excuses. I remember even having a conversation with people in my family years ago about the US debt, and they were just like, it must be for a reason. That was their answer for like $20 trillion of debt. It's just, yeah, it must be for some reason. And so that's really ultimately all we can do in this day with God, is just hope that all of this chaos and confusion worldwide is for a good reason, and then that's really all we have. And then we just say it, without, blinking an eye like they do. And it is true. We have to have faith, and we know that is true, but we can learn from them, just have this sort of blind faith, but ours will be rooted in an entity that's orchestrating the entire narrative. So they're defending their invisible entity, like these elites, the government, which is just a phrase for a group of people making decisions, central bankers, etc. And people of faith, people of the Bible, have a quote invisible entity as well, and we can defend him really the same way. These people are relentless. We can learn about their persistence. Like I said, every flat Earth video and I can't imagine what it's like on people with bigger channels. Like, just it's immediate. The same people just saying nothing, and they're relentless. And so it's 10 out of 10 times, and so they're passionate. About their belief that we live on a spinning ball, and we can be that way about the fact that we don't. And obviously, like the terminology and the language that they use. The terminology is not precise and scientific, which we can't be that way. And then because that's not being clever or intelligent or a deep thinker, but, the harsh language is unnecessary most of the time. So we do it in a different way, but we can definitely learn from how persistent and passionate they are. One thing I thought of is this is almost like imagine the world that we're like this, but we had equal power, people who believe that they're working for God. Right now we have to worry about speaking out against the government. Like, it's almost like an awkward thing. We have to carefully pick words and stuff so people don't get offended, that we're insulting the government. And so we can also defend God in the sense that we can make people at least slightly self-conscious when they speak out against God, when they say something that is faithless or whatever. That's, the world needs that accountability. Sometimes we can feel guilty about sharing God with people, even in very, very small ways, because it's bad news for a majority of people on earth. And so we don't have to be that way. So these trolls have made it uncomfortable to speak out against the government. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Oh man, you're just paranoid, and you're going up against all of science and all that kind of stuff. Well, these people need to be aware of, and I think they do now, that they're going up against the entire Bible. That's a pretty big book that says that in it explicitly, if you have half a brain cell, that we're not spinning. And it says that we have two lights under an enclosure called the firmament. So, and firm doesn't mean soft, like Pastor Stephen Anderson, who's satanic, said, it's a firmament. We live in an enclosed system, whether people like it or not. So we can make it awkward in a little way. I would say it's a little jab, because again, evil is going to win in the short term. But we can do that. We can do what our opponent's doing, but for God. And they exaggerate. They always say, oh, the government has all this technology, and the defense is so good, and America's great, especially those trolls from America. They exaggerate, and then they go and put sticks in the ground to prove that we're on a ball. So they only trust their government. They're like, I'm not smart enough to do anything smart, so I'll trust DARPA and the government, the military. But for us here on Earth, we're not smart enough. So I'm just going to prove to you that we're on a ball by putting sticks in the ground and measuring shadows, which leads to a non-unique solution at best. And so in many ways, we can do the same thing, and it's much easier for God, because especially if you're a religious person and it's the God of the Bible, he has done many, many things. He's made a human, just from scratch. It's his idea. And so that's just one of the many, many things. So his resume is incredible. The difficult thing is that he's also invented evil, and so that's not as easy to show for, but it's something that he did. And so it's incredible. And so we can also do that by, exaggerating our defense, for God, and be like, yeah, God it literally can do everything. And we are not able to do anything that impressive relative to him, from in a very literal way. So to me, the mindset of the shill, especially on the comment boards and on YouTube stuff, can be sort of role reverse into something that is righteous, and we can just be like them, just trust an invisible entity, exaggerate that entity's abilities, which for us would be worship, make other people self-conscious, about excluding God from the discussion, and, ridiculing God. If we make fun of the government, people just get silent. They're like, oh man, this person's speaking out against the government. Well, they need to be checked, when they speak out against God. It's good for them for us to check them, because again, if this God exists and it's not going to be good, you know, for people who do that kind of stuff. So it's also not good. We also have to, you know, drink of that as well. It's also not going to necessarily work out for all of us who speak out against the government. Fair enough, but I mean, I'll do that happily because they're just blatantly obvious that it's just blatantly obvious that they're evil. So also, so to me, that's trolling in a righteous way. And so I call that trolling for God. And then I also think that I'm sort of doing this a little bit myself, is I'm also trolling God directly a bit, because I feel like there are things that he said that the one major contradiction I believe that that God is making in the Bible is that he says that you know, people around the world are supposed to love the laws. But I know now, in this time that we live in now, anybody who tries to obey the law, they can't. So the spirit that's dealing with me says that's a valid point, but there are still aspects of the law that I wouldn't keep even if I was given freedom to honor all of it. And that's a fair rebuttal to me personally. And then the only other option is you have to reject your life. You know, you have to give up on my life. And I think that that's a fair response, but I also think that's not necessarily for everybody to swallow that kind of a pill. So I feel like that's a little bit of a contradiction with God, but I feel like what it's doing for me now is to troll God, you know, a little bit and say, okay, you say that lying is bad, you know, and I would say lying is probably the worst sin because it's the one that God can't deal with, because a perpetual liar is just somebody that God can't trust. You know, what can he do with that person? He can deal with, again, and he has dealt with every sin everywhere, every perversion, every perverse thought, but he can't deal with a liar, you know, on his team for, you know, a perpetual one. And so, you know, if God said that, you know, lying is evil, but I feel like I have to lie to pretty much do anything in this world, you know, I'm going to tell the truth, you know, and see like where that gets me. And so I think it's good, you know, again, where people can do it. And I would say it's good to do in all aspects of our life, but I'm sort of picking the ones that I think are very clearly defined to troll God, you know, and to include him in the day-to-day and make it, you know, a way to potentially draw closer to him, you know. And I think that this is a very good thing. And I would say if I learned some of these truths earlier in life, I would have done this more. That would have been the fun, quote, fun part. I would have made life more fun because I would have trolled God, you know, and I would have tried to do it in a righteous way, or it would have gotten more and more righteous over time, where I would include him in things purposely with a much more, you know, purposed mindset and wait for a response. So there's a lot we can learn from the left and the right hand side, and hope everyone's doing well. Bye.